Hello students and welcome to BA131 Module 2. This is the video lecture for Module 2. Here on the screen you have the sequence, you have the introduction, continue talking about educational translations. You have the video lecture, the Quizless flashcards for you to review, class exercise, and instructions on how to do this class exercise, and homework 2 as well. Homework 2, group discussion, the syllabus quiz is due this week, and the summer. So before we get into each of the assignments, let's go to the PowerPoint. So here is the PowerPoint for Module 2, and you can download it to follow along or just watch the video, but the resources are there. The links that you'll see here on the PowerPoint are also in the module, so there's no need to duplicate. This is the agenda for the module. We're going to be talking about translations in education. We'll see a couple of bloopers in the module. We'll talk about federal and state laws regarding limited English proficient students, LEP or LEP, educational glossaries, class exercise, homework, and discussion. So this is one of the bloopers. We'll see the other one in the module. You have here, caution, stand clear of door. In English, it's pretty clear. But as you'll notice, English communicates well in this kind of a telegraphic way, if you will. A few words placed in a certain sequence have meaning. But if you try to do the same thing with Spanish, it doesn't always work. For example, precaución, sure, that's fine. Now there's something missing there. If you can say what it is to yourself before I mention it, consider yourself very observant. Estar claro de puerta. Stand clear. Estar claro. Of course, that doesn't mean that. Estar claro means to have clarity or something like that, or to be light complected. De puerta. Literal translation, of course, that doesn't mean that. So in English, you have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. Caution, stand clear of door has a clear meaning. Precaución, estar claro de puerta means nothing in Spanish. So there are other ways of conveying that message. And if you look at precaución, what is missing is the tilde, the accent mark, on the O. Some people have heard, and it was true many years ago, many years ago, that you do not put tildes or accent marks on capital letters. That was the case because when you think about printing presses, you had the letters, right? You had the lines that made up the paragraphs, and then you had the upper cases and lower cases. Where did that come from? Because back then they had lots of letters, little tiny letters. They used to put together lines and sentences and paragraphs on plaques, and they used to get the letters. Each letter was placed to form the letters, and of course they put them backwards, so when they print on it, then it's printed forward. It's like looking into a mirror. So you would have the letters organized, and they had two cases. They had the cases that were up above and the cases that were down below. So they had the uppercase letters in the case above and the lowercase letters in the lower cases. That's where that comes from. Now, if we imagine writing on a line, maybe go back to kindergarten, you have the two lines and then the little dotted line in the middle. That's how you see the uppercase fills out both lines, and the lowercase fills out the bottom, fits in the bottom. So you had these lines and the next line, the next line. So within this line, you had como, for example, C, lowercase o, M-O. If you want to place the accent mark, the tilde, you put it above the O, right? Because it fits in that second part. But in the capital letters, uppercase letters, the tilde would be above the line and it wouldn't fit. So La Real Academia made the decision to not place accent marks on capital letters just because they didn't fit. Not because it's incorrect, because they didn't fit. So they made that decision. Now with digital printing, So they reverted that rule, and now capital letters do have accent marks when they are required. So this should have been placed there. And we talk about spacing and all that, that's a different issue. But that's a little history lesson on capital letters, but more importantly on tildes, because we're going to be talking about the usage of tildes in this lesson and afterwards as well. So there are laws that are related to educational language access, and this is what it's about, language access. What is an LEP, Limited English Proficient? The U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division has a definition, which is right there. I'll summarize it in the next slides. And the California ELP Assessment and Language Services Policy and Process is right there in that link. Again, I'll summarize the appropriate sections that we need to know. So according to the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, there's this question, which looks like a test question, so pay attention. Must my child's school provide information to me in a language I can understand? And that is the issue, a language that they can understand. The answer is yes. Schools must communicate information to limited English proficient parents in a language they can understand about any program, service, or activity that is called to the attention of parents who are proficient in English. Essentially, that is what language access is. If an English-speaking parent would understand this message, a non-English speaking parent must be able to understand that same message. That, in essence, is what language access is. So that is the answer here. This includes, but is not limited to, information related to registration and enrollment in school and school programs, grievance procedures, and notices of non-discrimination, language assistance programs, parent handbooks, report cards, gifted and talented education, student discipline policies and procedures, magnet and charter schools, special education and related services, and meetings to discuss special education, parent-teacher conferences, requests for parents' permissions for student participation in school activities. So anything that is related to those areas, not limited to those, the non-English speaking parents must have access to the same information. In our case is Spanish, but any language that the parent speaks, the school system has the obligation to provide this language access. And that's what we are doing. As interpreters, as translators, we are here to provide language access to non-English speaking parents. Another question from the same area, may my child's school ask my child, other students, or untrained school staff to translate or interpret for me? The straightforward answer is no. Schools must provide translation or interpretation from appropriate and competent individuals and may not rely on or ask students, siblings, friends, or untrained school staff to translate or interpret for parents. Again, this goes back to language access. From the California Department of Education, that is the link right there. California Department of Education, CDE, is responsible for ensuring that all persons, including limited English proficient, are provided equal access to available services and information. The commitment of the CDE is that all of its programs and services are accessible to its LEP customers in compliance with the De Mali a la Torre Bilingual Services Act and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This includes, but is not limited to, provide resources which include interpreters and translated materials of information and services in the language readily understood by an individual seeking guidance or assistance from the CDE. So, going back to language access. And a person has a right to interact with the CDE in a language that best ensures meaningful access to programs and services at no cost to them. The district cannot charge for interpreters to the parent direct. They are to provide that service. And here's an exception to the not using untrained staff or not using students, here in bold. The CDE may request a family member or minor to interpret for the person only in an emergency situation or to obtain non-essential information, such as identifying the language that the person speaks. And there have been few cases where a parent comes, the school has Spanish-speaking staff, but the parents do not speak Spanish. They look Mexican, but they do not speak Spanish. They speak Mixteco or another indigenous language. In that case, if the student speaks some English, they may ask the student, "What language do your parents speak?" And then the student can interpret that information in order to, continuing here, in the event that this happens, in the event of such an occurrence, the CDE will follow up with an individual via a certified bilingual employee to find out the nature of the inquiry and provide the necessary information. Once the school finds out that the parent speaks Mixteco, they can secure a Mixteco English interpreter so that they can ensure the proper communication with the parent. And then here's the complaint procedure. All complaints against a school or school district pertaining to language services should be filed directly with the school district. Now, when working with educational glossaries, here are some tips for education translations, interpretations. Research your area of translations. Are you speaking about Kinder 12 terminology? Are you going to be needing financial aid terminology? Are you going to be interpreting at an IEP, a special education meeting? So you would need that terminology. Look for the school district or educational institution language materials and official glossaries if they have them. Some districts have their own official glossary. If they do, use that because that is what they are used to. Research online for Spanish translations of the educational terminology in question. Do not reinvent the wheel. There are many resources out there. There are some glossaries in the sections that I mentioned earlier. Use those. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And we have glossaries above Module 1 in Canvas, as I showed you in the introductory video, the welcome. You're going to be writing in Spanish for one of the assignments in this module, and there are some quotation marks. So you need to know the difference in the placement of the quotation marks, or comillas, which is different than English. So we have the rules right here. Para una cita textual, el punto o coma va fuera de las comillas. Por ejemplo, you open the quotation mark. ¿Por qué me dijiste que no quieres ayudar en el proyecto de la oficina? Cierra pregunta, cierra la comilla, coma. Preguntó sorprendida la supervisora de la empleada estrella de la empresa. In English, you have the closing question mark, comma, and then the quotation. In Spanish, you have the closing question mark, quotation mark, comma. You see it here. Ya quiero que se termine la clase, BA131. Cerramos el signo de admiración, comilla, coma, exclamó el estudiante. Same thing with the periods. Según las cifras más recientes del Censo de Estados Unidos, la población latina supera los 58 millones. Cerramos las comillas. Punto. Please note that there will be points deducted when you place the period, comma, or quotation mark inside the quotation marks as in the English grammar as opposed to using the Spanish grammar. So pay attention to those details. Here are some grammar rules for using of the tilde. I have a tab open for that, so I'll show you that when we go back to the module, but you can click here and follow that as well. Because you're going to need to place the tildes correctly based on the accent mark rules and la tilde diacrítica en monosílabos. Hay una diferencia entre el sin tilde y el con tilde. El sin tilde es el artículo masculino. El con tilde es el pronombre personal. This is the, and this is he or him, a él. Examples. El conductor paró el automóvil. No lleva tilde porque ese es the driver stopped the automobile, the car. Él como pronombre personal. Me lo dijo él. This one does have a tilde. This is from the introductory class. We'll review these there. But if you need a refresher or if you have not taken that class yet, you need to know these. The difference between tú and tú, me and me, all of these. So review them in the module and practice the exercises if you need them. This is class exercise 2. We'll go over that in the module. The instructions are there, and we'll go over that as well on how to do homework 2. And if you have any questions about any of these, you can inbox me on Canvas or email me. You can also ask the question in the Canvas modules in the general course questions. That way, if one of your classmates has the answer before I get to it, they may answer as well. So let's go back to the module. Back here in the module, we'll go to the introduction. We saw that there. These are the requirements for the module. The assigned readings. This is the DACA information that is related to one of the assignments. Aquí está el ejercicio para las tildes. Te lo abrí de este lado. Esto es muy práctico para que practiques la tilde diacrítica tú o tú. Y aquí hay ejercicios. Si le oprimes aquí, aquí puedes poner tú o tú. ¿Lleva tilde o no lleva tilde? ¿Cuál es tu nombre? Tu nombre, tu nombre. Aquí pones la opción. Tú eres el mejor. ¿Lleva tú, un tilde o sin tilde? Sé que tú me quieres. ¿Puedo usar tu lápiz? Vas a poner una de estas dos. Tú con tilde o tú sin tilde. Al final, oprimes en comprobar y te van a salir las correctas y las incorrectas para que sepas. Y si necesitas ayuda, oprimes. Aquí hay más ejercicios para la siguiente categoría y así sucesivamente. Para que practiques los demás. Mi versus mi, más sin tilde, más tilde, sí versus sí, de, etc. Again, we cover this in the introduction class, BA130. If you have taken that and you're good at this, you can skip that. Just make sure that you use the proper placement of the tildes in the writings that you do. We also have the flashcards. Click there, you can review those. You're going to need that for one of the assignments in this module. Now, the class exercise, you're going to do a written translation. Please follow these instructions carefully. This is a two-part assignment. The written translation is due by this Sunday. Then you're going to record your translation, which is going to be due the following Sunday. You're going to translate this in a Word document. And remember to change the language setting to Spanish so that it can check your tildes, your grammar, etc. This is a little bit older, so the New York Times has placed this under a paywall. But here is the article. So you can try to check that if you want to, but this is the article right here. You're going to translate the title, the byline, the date, and these 8 paragraphs. So you copy the text from here all the way to the end of the 8 paragraphs. And that's what you need to translate. Once you have written your translation, you're going to upload the Word document below so I can edit it or give you feedback, and then you can get the points. And you have the due date at the bottom. And here's the rubric on the grading we'll be doing. Here are some tips on doing your written translation. I mentioned this earlier. Quotation marks in Spanish are different from the English quotation marks. I won't repeat that, but here's another explanation. If you use Google Translate to translate your document and you do not check, you do not proofread, you're going to get several mistakes in your translation, including the placement of the quotation marks. So It's better if you do your own translation. Proofread, proofread, and proofread. And make sure that you use the proper form of address. Usted, not to. The due date's right there. And you can read the article a few times. Select Spanish as the language default in Word. You can copy and paste the text to translate, as I mentioned, into the Word document. Then you select the Spanish. Write your translation in proper Spanish. Pay attention to grammar, the appropriate use of tú versus usted, and the corresponding verb. And then, once you finish your translation and get any notes and corrections, you're going to record yourself reading the same text you translated, and that is due the following. And in your recording, make sure you pronounce the accents correct. So you can do the first part this week and the recording the next week. For your homework, you're going to practice consecutive interpreting. This is an introduction on consecutive interpreting. We talked about this last week. So read through this. The instructions are here. You're going to interpret a special education teacher and school psychologist from English to Spanish to the parent, and from the parent from Spanish to English to the IEP team. Again, you're going to do this in a consecutive mode. You're going to record yourself. You can do it with your cell phone or in any recording device. Make sure that the recording you submit is free of background noise, except for the audio of the speaker that you are shadowing, interpreting for, and that your voice is loud and clear. Play it to yourself. Make sure that you can hear it clearly at the appropriate volume, loudness before submitting. You're going to save your audio file as your last name underscore your first name 2. This is the second homework. So if I were to do this, I would write Vargas underscore Cesar 2. And then you upload the assignment. If you don't know how to upload in Canvas, this article tells you how to submit a media file, and you have to do. In the recording that is below, you're going to hear a pause, a lag or a pause, so that you are able to record your voice within that space, that silence. Do not change or manipulate the length of the audio recording. I should be able to hear the original audio and your rendition back to back on your recording. This may be your first time doing this, so don't worry about being perfect. Just do your best. Try your best and keep the audio going once you start. Even if you feel you get cut off, just continue and practice the exercises. And this forces you to be mindful of your time. Remember to have pens, pencils, and a notebook so you can take notes when you practice this consecutive interpreting. Consider how to chunk all the information that you hear and visualize what you are hearing. You can close your eyes if you need to concentrate. You can listen to it first. Write down any words that you don't know in your dictionaries, the glossaries. Quizlet flashcards refer to the educational glossaries. Any lists that you hear, make sure you present them in the order they are listed. Don't take too much time writing each and every letter in every word. You can abbreviate because it takes too much time. You can develop your own shortcut method, such as writing D for dizziness and for nausea and things like that. Write as neatly as possible. You want to be able to read your own writing, and you can listen to your recordings and upload the best one. And then you can evaluate yourself. Did you have any false starts, like crutch words such as did you use appropriate terms? High register, low register as appropriate. And you have the due date right here. If you have any questions, send me a message. And you're only going to get better with practice. As I say, your first is your worst. So get it done, get it over with, and then do it again. Practice, practice, practice. So this is the audio you will interpret. You're going to play it, and at some point, you're going to hear a pause. In that pause is where you interpret. You're not doing simultaneous. You're going to hear the words. When there's a pause, you interpret. So play it first once or twice to yourself, get the feeling for the rhythm, the words, etc. In real life, you don't get that practice, so go ahead and take advantage of a recording. And if you want to see consecutive interpretation in action, here are some videos as resources, as references on how to do consecutive interpretation. This is in court. This is someone interpreting Arabic for consecutive interpretation. May not understand what the interpreter is saying, but just notice how she is taking notes and is able to reproduce the language. Even though you don't understand or may not understand Arabic, you can see the process at work. And there's some other examples of note taking, interpreting without notes, etc. For the group discussion, we're going to talk about language, identity, and inclusive communication. So read through this. I don't need to read you the instructions. They are right here for you. I do want to make sure that we keep the discussion respectful. So read through this as well. And you have the due dates. We have the syllabus quiz that is due this week. So go ahead and do that as well. Mentioned this in the last module, first module. And finally, in the summary, in this module and in future modules, I may include a deeper dive. This is not required, but for those of you who want to go above and beyond the minimum requirements of the class, these are some additional resources related to what we covered in the module. So in here, you have the complete guide to Spanish accent marks beyond what we covered in the introduction and we reviewed in this module. All the rules with examples and exceptions of accent marks. This is in Spanish. Y para un mayor reto, visita esta página de la Universidad de Valencia sobre las reglas de acentuación del castellano. Lee las reglas y realiza los ejercicios al fondo de la página. Luego puedes compararlas con estas reglas de acentuación de la página de palabras a medida y considera para ti mismo cuál de las dos exposiciones es más fácil de entender y por qué. ¿Cuál de las dos recomendarías para alguien que sabe hablar español, pero que quiere mejorar su escritura en español? ¿Por qué? These are, in addition to the module, these are optional for those of you who want a deeper dive into this topic. You are not required to do anything with this. There's no submission for this. This is for your own edification if you so choose. You can skip it if you want to, but the more successful translators and interpreters want to delve deeper into language and the details and the nuances of language. So that is you. Here are some additional resources for you. And that's it for this week. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a wonderful